Go beyond the headlines with the new MSNBC app. Get real-time analysis from live blogs to in-depth essays, video highlights from your favorite shows, and the latest updates on the 2024 election. Visit msnbc.com/app to download.
Hello, welcome to How to Win 2024. It's Friday, July 19th. I'm Jennifer Palmieri, and here with my co-pilot, Claire McCaskill, who is back after a week of vacation. But I feel like I've seen you so much that I don't feel like you've been on vacation at all.
I don't feel like I've been on vacation at all, to tell you the truth. I'm flat worn out.
I barely remember you being gone, but I guess you were gone. Yeah,
I was gone, and believe me, I was tempted to stay gone.
I know.
And, we have a conversation here every week, and I think it's really important to say at the very top of this week how emotionally difficult it is for anybody who cares deeply about this process.
Yeah.
This is really hard stuff. I mean, President Biden is my friend.
Yeah, me too.
And I think people that are out there screeching online one way or the other, I think we got to just take a moment to realize that the reason this is so hard is because it's painful, emotionally painful.
It's wrenching, it's emotionally painful, and also it's such a close call about you're scared by, you feel like the current option isn't working, but you open door number one and like, what are you unleashing into the world, right? So after the debate, that first weekend when everybody was like, oh, he's going to drop out. It's like, he's not going to drop out. He's going to drop out 48 hours after the debate. Like, nor should we want him to. Like, none of that, It's going to take at least 3 weeks to sort this out. And that's going to be painful, but that's okay because you got to get it right and you got to make the best decision you can because of everything that's at stake. And if people talk about, there's all this infighting of Democrats. It's like, no, that's not what's happening. No, what it is people are trying to figure it out. People are trying to figure out, how's he doing? Is he up to this? What's the right thing to do? What's the responsible thing to do given what's at stake? And I'm just grateful that we have the kind of leaders that we have in the House and Senate, from Schumer and, Leader Jeffries in the House and obviously Pelosi, to kind of help navigate this with their caucuses and understand where they're coming from and have the credibility to go to the president and tell them what they really think, what's right.
I was thinking about the name of our podcast, and the reason that there is so many gut-wrenching discussions and difficult decisions to make is because of the name of this podcast.
Right.
It is just, everyone is unified around the concept of winning this election.
Yep.
And it's just people have honest disagreements about how to do it. And that shouldn't be evil. Those that are maintaining that it's a huge mistake for Biden to move off the ticket, I get it. Those who believe it's absolutely horrible to think that Biden would remain at the top of the ticket, I get it. And that's because there's no easy or simple answer here. So We're going to talk more about all of that. We're also going to talk with Sam Stein, managing editor at The Bulwark, who is on the ground in Milwaukee this week at the Republican National Convention. We want to take a hard look at Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance. What themes, if any, emerged from Trump's official coronation other than macho man? And remind people what the stakes are if he's reelected. So let's go gut check if I were in the room. First, we need to acknowledge the unity the whole country has about the near assassination of Donald Trump. And
oh my God! I mean, I still can't even believe that happened. You know, it's almost so shocking that we can't even absorb it. It's like, it was absorbed in a day. Felt like it was going to have a huge impact on the race, and it did make everybody. I think it was a very sobering, scary thing, and you realized how tenuous this all is, right? The democracy, how we've been lucky that rhetoric hasn't provoked as much, that we haven't seen more of this, frankly,
Yeah, and listen, I recall no one being irresponsible. Anybody who's been in an elected position or is doing the kinds of things we do every day, Jen, I don't think anybody has been irresponsible in the way they've talked about this. I will say that we do know that the shooter was researching on his phone, not just Trump, but also Biden. And also the Democratic National Convention So this is not somebody, who's registered Republican. So I do think it's irresponsible for anyone on the right or the left to try to ascribe to either candidate that they're totally responsible for this. I do think that Donald Trump has gone places that presidential candidates typically have not gone in terms of how he has talked about political violence.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to sit by and accept from the Republicans that this was the Democrats trying to kill Donald Trump or that they are responsible because of their rhetoric. That is not fair. And I don't think we have to accept that while still being very respectful of the danger that Donald Trump faced and how glad we are that he avoided serious injury.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to because it's just been so stunning, we're going to talk about the evolution of the week. So that happened Saturday night, Sunday, sort of us processing the assassination attempt. Then you have the Lester Holt interview that was on Monday. And it's even that feels like
a year ago.
A year ago, right. What was your impression of that? That was not great. It was not great.
It was not great. He did pivot and punch a little bit about all of Trump's lies during the debate, which was good.
Mm-hmm.
But
we're both but they're, obviously confused during parts of the interview, not following the thread of the conversation. So that happened on Monday. And then Wednesday happens. And I feel like that's where it all starts to change. Adam Schiff comes out, a close ally of Nancy Pelosi's. And I'm going to step back to say, I am not operating from independent knowledge. I'm stringing things together as someone with experience and an interested observer. I see a week ago Wednesday, Nancy Pelosi does her shot across the bow on Morning Joe, right? She says the president needs to make a decision, even though the president's already made a decision and time is running out. Then Thursday last week, there's the press conference after NATO. After the press conference, Hakeem Jeffries goes to the White House right away to talk to the president. We know that a lot of people in the caucus have concerns about him staying, puts out the statement Friday morning that does not endorse Biden staying in the race. And then we find out this Wednesday, after Schiff goes, we find out that Senator Schumer actually went to Rehoboth last Saturday prior to the assassination attempt to also deliver a very tough message. And then we see it is revealed to us on Wednesday that the whole House and Senate leadership has already spoken to the president to express their very serious concerns. And obviously, if they had some conclusion other than they thought that he should stay in the race, they would have said so. But that is not what they said.
Yeah. And I think, first of all, it really is irritating to me. I'm so glad you talked about the leadership in the House and the Senate. Because one of the things that's really irritating to me is that people think that somehow there's a room somewhere and these big elite leaders get in that room and go, oh, okay, let's just kneecap Joe Biden. No.
For better or worse, there's no smoke-filled room, people.
No.
There's no one actually in charge. There's not 12 people somewhere deciding all this. That is not happening.
And let me pull back the curtain on what has actually happened behind the scenes. Very quietly and very methodically, there was a decision made by important elected officials in our party that we needed to give Joe Biden time, space, and grace, as many have said, to hopefully figure out on his own, with the help of his family and close staff, that maybe exiting the race was going to be a good thing. That did not happen. So I think most of the battleground state Senate candidates waited 7 to 10 days before going into the field with a poll, because you want to wait, Jen, as you know, at least a week after an event to begin polling to see if it's had an impact. And they ask questions like, would it impact your vote for, let's just say, hypothetically, Jackie Rosen, if she continued to assert on the campaign trail that Joe Biden was capable of serving out another 4.5 years as president? And they had those numbers.
Yeah.
And all of these battleground state Senate candidates, which we have to win the Senate, they are in a position.
And it's not like self-interested, like, all I care about is my race. That's not what's happening.
No, that's not it. That's not it.
That is not it, yeah.
And for many of these battleground states, I will just tell you, the internal polling had a significant swing. I'm not going to name which candidates, but there was internal polling, for example, that had a candidate who was 2 up before the debate, who's 3 down after the debate. That's 5-point swing. That is huge in a battleground state.
Yeah, and when everything's with this race like this where everything is so locked, that is a very big deal.
And if you're campaigning in a tough state, 1 or 2 points is the world. Yeah. I used to always say in my races, 46 is easy. 49 is really hard. I can get to 46 in my sleep.
Yeah.
But 49 is really like climbing 16 Mount Everest. So 2 points is a huge thing to these battleground state Senate candidates. And Schumer is just carrying the data. He is doing what his job is representing millions of Americans who have elected these senators and these senators who want to be reelected to give this information to the President of the United States. It's not any more complicated than that. And I've never seen the kind of swings we now have in these battleground states, where there's an average of 12 points difference between Biden's numbers and the Senate candidate numbers. That's crazy time. You don't see that. That is like the house is on fire. We need another fire brigade here to put it out. So I just don't think it's fair to these leaders to be castigated the way they have by some in our party for doing their jobs. That's all they're doing is their jobs. They're representing the people in their caucus.
Yeah, and it's not even just their jobs as like the Democratic leaders. It's their jobs as constitutional officers. They are, particularly in the House of Representatives, it is the people's body. And Leader Jeffries is talking with every member of his caucus, and they are representing what their polling showing, but also just what they're hearing in their districts. And these leaders are going to the President of the United States to, this is how it's supposed to work, to say, not just we have political concerns, but it's like the stake of losing to Trump, if that's a likelihood or real possibility, the stake of not having the House of Representatives or not having the Senate when you're going to be dealing with a Trump administration. And I think that they have handled it so well and, trying to not inflict any damage on the president.
I also want to make this point. There is something that most, not all, but most of the people that are in elected positions that have come out full-throated that Biden should not leave the ticket are in very safe seats.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
They're in very safe seats. They can't imagine their wildest dreams ever being beaten by a Republican. And it is a different animal. I just tell you, all the people yelling at me doesn't bother me because I've been yelled at for 40 years about half the people in my state.
Democrat in Missouri, man, what are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly. So the point is that if you are in a safe seat, it feels different to you than if you are battling out for every scrap of a vote you can get. And that's how we make majorities. We make majorities in the middle. We don't make majorities on the ends. We make it in swing districts in the House, and we make it in states that are capable of voting for either Ds or Rs in the Senate. And that's why this is also important. What do you think if we were in the room, obviously the campaign still needs to be doing contrast constantly. And they're doing that because we have to keep pushing how bad Trump is, because even if it is not Joe Biden, that message is universal to our party at this point.
And the thing is, the big thing I think that comes, if I were in the room, the Republican convention started strong, but it ended with one conclusion: wow, this guy is beatable, right? I mean, it was just, Trump was so low energy, unfocused, if he can't attack Biden, he has nothing to say. And you come out of it thinking like, wow, these guys offered nothing. He is unfocused and very beatable, and just go after them hard on Project 2025, abortion, and democracy. And, the vice president, frankly, has been very effective in doing that. She could do that. And the degree to which the president is, if the president is staying in, just do that. Just talk about that. Make this a referendum on Trump, particularly now. I mean, yes, the Biden campaign's got a lot to be proud of, but we don't have time to do that anymore about accomplishments. It's like go, go, go on the referendum on him.
Exactly. So we're going to take a quick break here. When we're back, Sam Stein, managing editor at The Bulwark, joins us from Milwaukee to give his impressions of where this convention began and where it wound up. Back with Sam in a moment.
Saturday, September 7th, it's MSNBC Live Democracy 2024, our premier live audience event with your favorite MSNBC hosts. Visit msnbc.com/democracy2024 to buy your tickets. Today's news requires more facts, more context, and more analysis. The world's never been harder to understand. That's why it's never been more important to try. MSNBC. Understand more.
Welcome back. This week, the 2024 Republican National Convention was in full swing in Milwaukee, but what a difference a week makes. Republicans now have a vice presidential nominee, J.D. Vance, and a very unified Republican Party that rallied around Trump as their guy and MAGA as their platform just days after the shocking attempt on his life.
So how did it wind up? Sam Stein has been on the ground in Milwaukee this week. I really feel like we don't even need to introduce Sam Stein. Most of you know who he is. He is somebody who likes to talk about this stuff like we do and is very, very good at it. He had a front row seat at the convention, and he joins us now. He is managing editor at The Bulwark and formerly Politico's deputy managing editor for politics. He is also a fellow MSNBC contributor, so he knows why I have no makeup on today, because I have been up for Morning Joe and at 30 Rock until after midnight for several days in a row. And I just went on strike this morning and said, not an ounce of makeup is going to touch my face.
Okay. No, you look great, Claire.
You look great.
Yeah. So let's talk about the convention. First of all, I want to start by quoting George Bush. That was some weird shit.
George Bush from Trump's 2020 or 2017 inaugural.
Yeah. Inaugural,
yes,
exactly. So what was it like inside the hall? Did it feel as unified as it looked?
Yeah, I mean, it was, yes, I can confirm it was weird shit. But in the hall, there was a very unifying element to it. I mean, they adore the guy, right? Like it's not just politics. There's like there's a culty element to it. And then obviously in the wake of this assassination attempt, there's a religious element to it now in a way that really, there had been some of that, but it's been taken to a new level. And throughout the convention over the last 3 days, especially, you've seen people talk about Trump in these sort of providential tones, and which is ironic because the entire convention prior to the assassination attempt was structured to be very secular. Like they had pushed aside the social conservative agenda. They had very few speakers who were from the religious faiths. It was a really secular agenda. And then because of this, it became different. In terms of the mood inside the hall, I think to a person, they basically are of the belief that he will win. The confidence level was oozing through the attendees. I spent a good chunk of yesterday just talking to delegates around the floor, asking them a very sort of simple, unscientific survey on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being convinced he will lose and 10 being having the utmost certainty that he will win. Where do you stand? Here's some of the results. New York delegation, I got 4 10s, 1 12. Alabama delegation, 2 10s, 3 11s. Illinois delegation, a 12. Pennsylvania, 3 10s and 11. I got a 9 there. That was one of the 2 9s. Colorado, a 9, but only because they were worried it might be stolen. I mean, this is the stuff you're talking about. And so, it sets up the situation where basically people were having an incredibly joyous time. There were Congo lines, dancing, things like that. Does that mean they're overconfident? Maybe. Does it set up a situation where if they do lose, that we have, an incredibly suspicious and maybe angry electorate on that side? Yeah, it does. And I don't think, I think Trump's obviously the favored candidate here, but I don't think it's out of the realm of reason that he could still lose this election.
And what about, it's interesting to see what they presented and what they had planned to present, right?
Yeah.
After the shooting, they said that they were going to have a unity agenda. What's his face? Who's the doofus that's like, yeah, they loaded my old
Ron
speech.
Johnson, yeah.
Ron Johnson, Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin had a fiery speech.
By the way, a really intellectual heavyweight. I can speak from serving with him. I mean, the saying, not the brightest light in the marquee, was designed for him.
Yeah.
It's like, I had a toned down speech, but they didn't load it into the teleprompter. They put the wrong one in there. Yeah. Okay. So, but what do you think they had a plan to do? What did they change it? And what actually happened? Because it kind of I'm not sure that anything emerged from this, any sort of compelling narrative emerged from this convention other than Trump was saved by the handcuffs.
God. Yeah. No, it was, I totally agree with you, not just about Ron Johnson. I was struck by how little narrative there was, or narrative arc there was. I mean, if you watch J.D. Vance's speech, I don't know who put it together. It was disjointed. It went back and forth between his bio and random issues. And Trump's speech last night was long. There wasn't really a credible thematic underpinning to it. I mean, this convention basically was reshuffled because of what happened. The whole idea that it was a unity convention, I think, is silly. The unity was let's unify as Republicans and beat Democrats. That
Yeah.
was the unity. Oh, the other unity was let's drop these investigations and probes into my conduct for the good of the country. But if you had to pick out a couple themes, I guess one was, Trump is here to save us, and the other was immigrants are bad. And the entire speech last night, he kept coming back to immigrants. Like, it didn't matter the topic. Social Security, immigrants are going to steal it from you. Jobs, immigrants are going to steal it from you. Fentanyl, immigrants are going to bring it to you. I mean, it was just a very nativist, anti-immigrant speech. I think that's, if you're talking just pure policy, that is the one main through line for all of this stuff is we got to close the borders and we got to drill more oil. That's it.
Yeah. And, it's fascinating to me because maybe this is because I'm a woman that I felt this, and maybe I'm looking too carefully, but it felt like also there was a theme that, let's celebrate men.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. When Trump came out night before last to the theme, it's a man's world.
Mm-hmm.
And then that Hulk Hogan shit. Oh, my God. And, it's really hard for me, Sam, because I think of the Republican Party conventions. I mean, I've gone to a lot of conventions, right? And I think, frankly, mostly they're a leftover artifice from another time that is unnecessary. And by the way, the numbers for this convention were not good in terms of people watching it.
Yeah.
I mean, if they thought they were getting young men by all of this macho shit, young men weren't watching. I got news for them. I looked at the numbers from the night J.D. Vance gave his speech. First of all, 5 million fewer viewers watched J.D. Vance than watched Pence in 2016. Wow. And secondly, the demographic, I think it was 14 million people for J.D. Vance. And of that 14 million, 12 million of them were over 65.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
So it gives you how skewed the audience that he was looking for was to older. And, you would think they'd want to appeal to women at this point in some way, but instead they are all in. And this has always been him, right? That I just need more MAGA. I don't need to worry about suburban women. I don't need to worry. Talk about, there's two things that they didn't want to talk about at this convention: Mike Pence and abortion.
Right. So, it's such an astute observation. We had a story up yesterday from my colleague, Mark Caputo. And basically, for like weeks and months, we've been consuming these stories that the Trump campaign is, trying to win over African Americans and Hispanics, and they're making inroads into the coalition. But Mark's piece was sort of a course correction. It was saying, no, in fact, they're trying to juice white male turnout. Like, they think they can just absolutely juice white male turnout. And they had lost a little bit of the white male margins from 2016 to 2020. And they felt like that's why Biden won. And maybe so.
Right.
And so they wanted to win those back. And this convention was essentially designed around that. Now, of course, don't talk about abortion because you don't want to cause harm to your campaign. But if you look at just the speaker lineup, Kid Rock, Hulk Hogan, Dana White, this is just let's get like men to like salivate over this. The issues are what you point out, which is it's not just white men. It's sort of generationally how do you divide those white men, right? Like older white men, younger white men. And if you're banking a lot on younger white men to come out and vote for you, you have to be able to reach them. And that's not always sure because young people don't really pay attention to the stuff. The one place where I might add a caveat to what you said, Claire, is on viewership. Yes, the numbers are down and that's clear. And yes, this is a relic of the past. But their sense, the Trump people's sense, is that people will view small, shorter packaged clips of this. The reason you have Hulk Hogan do the intro speak is not because you're reaching people through TV and they're going to see him. It's because someone will package Hulk Hogan ripping his shirt on the convention floor to reveal Trump Vance. And that will be shared in the mediums that younger white men get their news from as opposed to TV. And so that's what they're banking on. I do think there's a little risk in saying, hey, we can reach these younger voters and turn them out. As you and Jen know, it's like they don't always vote.
It's harder than it looks.
Yeah.
It's harder than it looks. We're going to make you stick around for another segment here in a minute, but we need to talk a little bit about J.D. Vance. And, there is such a disconnect between Donald Trump doing an interview with Business Insider in the days before the convention, promising more corporate tax cuts, wanting to put a scion of Wall Street, the Secretary of Treasury, speaking just to CEOs. He has always longed to be among those guys, and he wants those guys, by and large, they are guys, to love him, the business community. And then you have J.D. Vance getting up there and basically saying, we are going to come and mess you up, Wall Street. we are in your face and you are done. I mean, how in the world do they sell? How does J.D. Vance get around the fact that what Trump talks about more than anything else is making sure he once again lowers the corporate tax rate?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's been interesting to see them try to do this economic populist stuff while also keeping a foothold in the CEO world. As has been reported, CEOs, Fox News were not on the Vance train. They did not want him as the pick. They liked Doug Burgum. I think there's obvious reasons why. Vance doesn't speak their language, or at least doesn't pretend to speak their language, but
he
Trump
doesn't pretend to speak their language, is correct.
But Trump's also done this for 8 years, right? He presents himself as the champion of the working man, but he doesn't actually put together a policy portfolio that would suggest that's what he wants. I found it, of all the speakers this week that were intriguing to me, I thought it wasn't Vance, it wasn't Trump, it was Sean O'Brien. It was the Teamsters president who got up there and was talking about, inroads with Republicans on working class issues. Every single Republican, including Vance, they don't support the PRO Act. They didn't support the bill, the COVID relief bill that included the massive pension relief for the Teamsters. I mean, I understand why Vance and Trump try to have it both ways. That's sometimes what politicians do, and you try to win coalitions and try to bridge people together. What I don't understand is how union leaders could pretend that that's not happening.
Yeah. And most of them aren't. I mean, and even Sean O'Brien may end up endorsing the Democratic ticket, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and I think people are underestimating how much Sean O'Brien is playing inside politics within the Teamsters Union.
Interesting. Yeah.
Sean O'Brien is trying to hold on to the presidency. I mean, once you get one of those jobs, man, you want to hold on to it tightly. And he has watched and he knows the way you keep your membership supportive of you is to pay attention to the fact that he's got a whole shitload of members who are Trumpers.
Yeah.
Who are Trumpers.
Yeah.
And I think that was just a play for his membership. But ultimately, I would be shocked if he endorses that ticket. So especially if we have a different ticket.
We'll see.
We'll see, right? All right.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a quick pause here, but Sam Stein is going to stick around when we're back. More on what the Republican convention reveals about the goals of the party and how the race is shaping up against what I want to charitably call the somewhat big mess on our side of the aisle. Back in a moment.
Saturday, September 7th, it's MSNBC Live Democracy 2024, our premier live audience event with your favorite MSNBC hosts. Visit msnbc.com/democracy2024 to buy your tickets.
It's a new year, but it's the same old, no law, just vibes Supreme Court. I'm Melissa Murray.
I'm Leah Littman.
I'm Kate Shaw, and we are the hosts of the Strict Scrutiny podcast on Crooked Media, who also happen to be constitutional law professors in our free time.
Join us each week as we unpack what's on the docket for the Supreme Court term and break down the latest headlines while still managing a laugh or two.
So whether you're a lawyer, a law student, or just trying to make sense of what these cases mean,
Strict Scrutiny has got you covered.
New episodes out every Monday, wherever you get your podcasts.
it's time for some bad decisions.
Welcome back. Sam Stein is still with us. Okay, Sam, so we are post-convention. It's Friday morning. Beyond all of the unity and kumbaya, there are some real issues in front of the voters this fall. So let's talk through a few. Project 2025, abortion, and there seemed to be a full embrace of Trump's criminal convictions, painting him both as a fighter and a victim. And then there's a question of democracy, and would this coalition accept the results? So that's kind of a little menu for us to dive through. Project 2025, did you feel like you saw an embrace of that, an attempt to distance it? Also, I don't think it matters to some degree, but the Democrats are definitely going to make them own Project 2025. And certainly the J.D. Vance pick sort of cements that. What was your take?
There's an obvious attempt to pretend as if that thing didn't exist, right?
Yeah, right.
The complete disavowal prior to the convention, which of course had the Streisand effect or whatever it is, where you just draw more attention to it. But I think the instructive case here is how they put together their platform, which tells you everything about how they feel about policy. The platform was just completely shaved down into a page and a half or whatever.
That was pre-assassination attempt,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
Okay.
But, there was no mention of any of the social conservative issues. The abortion stuff was more or less put to the side. Now, you can make the case that, Trump is acting astutely, right? That's what you do when you want to win, is you try to just hide everything that's bad. And you tell your people to, go pound sand.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. And I was a little surprised at how little dissension was evident on ideological grounds here over the weekend, right?
Yeah.
Obviously different times and different eras, but 2016 convention, Republican side was defined by people literally trying to stage not a coup, but an insurrection against his nomination on the convention floor, right? And 2020 was defined by COVID, so that's totally weird. But you would expect to a degree that, the pro-lifers here would have put up more of a fuss, or that the hawks would have said, hey, why are we picking J.D. Vance? The guy basically wants to get out of stop the fight against Russia and Ukraine. None of that. And this just goes to show you that everything in this moment in time for the Republican Party is not built around any sort of cohesive ideology. It's built around, appreciation for a personality.
And particularly since it was his third nomination,
right.
I don't think we appreciate that. I don't know that that's ever happened before, that somebody's gotten 3 nominations in a row of a major political party.
There's been Richard Nixon, who had 3 conventions. I don't think it was in a row.
But that you would be putting, that you'd be like, okay, we have another shot at this. What's the big agenda that we want to get through? The only speech that I felt hung together sort of thematically was Eric Trump's.
Interesting.
Because Eric Trump gave the grievance speech.
Right.
Eric Trump gave the speech they normally would give, but I think they probably, because J.D. Vance's speech didn't hang together at all either.
Right.
Trump's speech was like not just a normal rally speech, but one of the lower energy rally speeches I've ever seen him give. And then JD, I think maybe it was because they were trying to thread the needle of like not being too partisan and sowing too much division. But they don't know how to do that. They have 2 speeds.
Right.
Like low energy Trump or grievance Trump.
And the sort of other, maybe slightly more charitable explanation is that they just didn't want to rock the boat, right? They're up, don't do anything provocative, don't rail against political prosecutions, although that came up frequently. Just play it safe. And when I was watching JD's speech, that's the first thing that came to my mind. It's like a football team playing sort of prevent defense, right? It's like, just don't do something that might screw you up, because we're winning this thing. All we have to do is just let the conversation be about Biden. We don't have to, push any buttons. We don't even have to really expand the coalition. I mean, JD's pick itself was not really an effort to expand the coalition.
No, not at all.
Right. So just keep doing what you're doing. And if you don't make any major screw ups, you'll be okay.
Yeah, I actually think that J.D. Vance was picked because it was the only person that Trump saw the kind of ability to do the rhetorical flame throwing that has been the essence of his appeal to voters. His willingness to say out loud things that a typical presidential candidate would never say out loud is really what catapulted him into the initial nomination. And I think he sees that capability in J.D. Vance and all the rest of it, even though, he hates the facial hair and probably is not really thrilled about the fact that he is married to the daughter of an immigrant, even though he happens to be married to the daughter of an immigrant. It really is interesting to me that this is more about him finding a personality that he thinks can eventually carry the personality-driven nature of the new, not Republican Party, but Trump Party.
Right. And there's also the grievance politics, the anti-immigration politics.
The anger, the total anger. I mean, J.D. Vance is just a pissed off guy.
Yeah. He wasn't always this way. I mean, this changed, obviously.
No. Yeah, no.
And Vance also is really close with Trump's kids. I mean, he's gotten really tight with Don Jr. He's kind of come up in this new conservative media ecosystem. He's not a Fox News person. He's more of like a Charlie Kirk, Turning Points USA person. I don't know if that makes sense, but this is the other thing that was really striking about, and I'll bring it back to Vance here, is that the vestiges of the Republican Party were evident. Like Fox News was not really the main media channel for this weekend. It was a bunch of different influencers. You didn't have George W. Bush. You didn't have Dick Cheney. You didn't have Paul Ryan. You didn't have Mike Pence. Like they say it's unity here, but it's not. It's been a purge.
Totally.
And Trump has remade this party. And in that context, the Vance pick makes a lot of sense. He's not really like a classic Republican. He's part of this new breed of Republicans who've been, in this case, opportunistically aligned himself with, but who have been influenced by Trump and Trump's politics. And he doesn't really reek of establishment favor. And I think Trump was drawn to that.
Yeah. Doug Burgum is definitely more of an establishment figure than J.D. Vance. And, it's fascinating to me, and this is something that we maybe even ought to spend some time on in a future episode, but Peter Thiel. I think it's really important for people to understand the invisible hand of Peter Thiel in this convention and in this man that is running to be president of the United States. I mean, Peter Thiel was really the first of now many bro brothers, tech billionaires that got on board with Trump. I mean, he actually spoke at the convention, I think in 16 or
yes,
I think he spoke in 16, right?
Yes, he did.
And J.D. Vance is a creature. No, I should say it this way. J.D. Vance was created by Peter Thiel.
In his current incarnation, anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
After Hillbilly Elegy on, it's been all Peter Thiel. Every job he's had, every office he's won, he was 100% got into the Senate because of Peter Thiel. He got Trump's endorsement because of Peter Thiel. Look at Hulk Hogan. That's a Peter Thiel guy. He funded Hulk Hogan's lawsuit against Gawker. Peter Thiel is everywhere in this. And, for a party that wants to talk about populism, to have a billionaire behind the curtain pulling the levers of power like this is stunning to me. And there needs to be more exposure about Peter Thiel. People need to understand this guy has really got some juice.
Yeah. To your point, there's also the tech bro culture that's coming around to Trump. I mean, David Sachs, who knew who David Sachs was 6 months ago? He got a speaking gig from the floor, and yet they didn't give they didn't have Mitt Romney or George Bush there, but David Sachs. And then, of course, what happened over the weekend was Elon Musk coming out and fully endorsing Trump, and then reports emerging that he's going to give $45 million a month to a super PAC supporting Trump. That's real money, right? So what does that mean for policy? What does that mean for the future of the country? We have not really fully comprehended what comes with that cash, basically.
Yeah, and Mark Andreessen. Yep. I mean, people don't know these names, but if you were from Silicon Valley and you understand where a lot of the money is in Silicon Valley, I mean, you can look around, whether it's PayPal or Palantir or Facebook or, any of the big names in tech, the big money, a lot of it now is totally on Trump. And it is fascinating to me.
I mean, not all of it. Not you're not talking like Apple and LinkedIn and,
no,
Google,
but you're talking about a lot.
But a lot. It's the bro-y side it's the disruptors, the people like the Bitcoin people, the crypto people. It's that crowd that the Musks, those people. Yeah.
Right. But they see in Trump also kind of and this is such a classic 2016 trope because this is what happened in 2016. They see in Trump kind of this empty vessel into which they can push their agenda. And we know this because they had Trump on that podcast that they all do. And then I think it was a couple of days later, he comes out and he's like, I'm fine with, certain types of visas for immigrants because I talk to these guys and that's what they want.
And he changed his position on crypto.
Exactly. And for them, what a wonderful investment, right? You get to have the potential president. And frankly, you watch Trump and he's more likely than not to win. You hedge your bets, right? You say, okay, maybe 2 years ago, they probably wouldn't have done this because it was uncertain if Trump could win and they would have been socially cascaded and also been politically problematic for them. But now you can get your foot in the door.
Okay, so let's turn. Okay. Yeah, go, Jen, go. It's time for him to weigh in on what's going to happen.
I'm going to use a listener question to do this.
Okay.
Michelle, her question was just wondering if the concerns are more about Joe Biden not being able to win by a big enough margin than him not winning at all. So this is I could see the logic being, quote, we have to win big to rebuild trust in elections, end quote. So I think probably what's embedded in Michelle's question is confusion that people are hearing Democrats, very senior Democrats in the party thinking that Biden really needs to drop out and seeming that it's likely that he will, or at least possible that he will, I should say.
Your feelings change by the hour.
I have never, I am just so wrecked by this whole drama from the last 3 weeks because there's sort of this dichotomy of people who all they want to do is beat Trump and win the House and win the Senate, thinking that he can't win, and then seeing polls that show the percentile, oh, Biden's got a 53% chance of winning. And there's just I think people are not saying I don't understand why are they so eager to push Biden out the door if the polls that I'm seeing in the public domain show that the race is still really close.
Mm-hmm.
And then what do you think's going to happen? I mean,
well, let's just set the stage for when we're talking because it's so dynamic that, it could be outdated in 20 minutes. We're sitting here Friday. It's 9:40 a.m. Okay. I'm watching as I'm recording this that Jen O'Malley Dillon's on Morning Joe, and she's giving a forceful case that he's not going anywhere. I mean, she has to give that case because as soon as you say, well, he's open to it, then it's done. But anyways, let's put that aside. It's been a very weird experience here in Milwaukee because obviously everyone's following what's happening on the Republican side. There's a whole convention going on in the city. But to a person, every journalist here is riveted by what's happening on the Democratic side. And half of the reporters here are actually here in Milwaukee reporting on Democratic politics. And I'm among them. I've been spending the last 3 days just calling people in the party. And look, to a person, people are freaked out. They think that this is not going to end well. They think there's different degrees of not ending well, right? Like most people I talk to in high ranks in Democratic circles think Biden will likely lose. They don't think it's a certainty that he will lose, but it's like fairly certain.
And explain why they think that because of the internal polling in the battleground states. Because I think that we don't get to this level of discussion on cable, frankly.
Right. So there's two reasons, right? Like, so you see these national polls, you're like, oh, well, he's got a fighter's chance. You see these 538 models, you're like, well, that's really interesting. He's actually favored.
Yeah.
And then you have to step back and say, okay, the national polls are pretty relevant. We don't choose presidents by a national popular vote.
Right.
The 538 model takes into account things like historical incumbency advantages in macroeconomic conditions, which, fine, great, like that's helpful, but it's not going to be determinative. Professor Alan Lichtman, who I've seen a lot thrown around, like he's got 13 principles for the presidency, and they've lined up most of the time, but that doesn't mean it's going to be tried and true. So the real sort of bread and butter that I come back to are two things. One is state polls. They're bad.
Yep.
They're just bad for Biden, and they've gotten worse. And I think people need to understand when you're talking about like 3 percentage points worse in state polls, that's not nothing. That's a lot, especially in a polarized country.
That's why Hillary lost.
Yeah.
Was 3 percentage points in polls across the board. Like everything dropped by 3 points.
And so if you started pre-debate already slightly down and you're now 3 percentage points even more down, it just means you have to make up more ground. And here's where number 2 comes in, which is there would be more confidence that he could make up ground if not for the fact that the debate was a disaster. And since then, he's had decent episodes, but he's also had bad episodes.
He's had some bad episodes.
And if you're playing with a hand that's not great, the question is, do you change your hand? And so when everyone's like, well, you know, the vice president doesn't pull that much better. True, but she's also got more tools in the toolkit. And secondarily, this is what I'm hearing a lot more of, is the psychic relief that you would get throughout the party in having that change, having a more deft candidate at the top of the ticket, and then being also able to say this argument about, you know, old candidates who are feeble and can't handle the job, like, we can now win this argument. I mean, look at Trump's speech last night. Like, why can't we have someone who's like, actually, no, we've made the tough choices. We have a younger candidate who's generationally more attuned to modern America, and it's their side that has the candidate who is meandering and out of touch and just gave an hour and a half speech on the convention that made no sense at times. And like, yeah, that's the case for making the switch. I can also understand the case for not making the switch, but I think it's less compelling.
Yeah, and I do think people, you know, the emotional narrative, even if you are 100% in favor of Biden staying at the top of the ticket, you are holding your breath.
Mm-hmm.
And what our party has this cycle that we've not had in previous cycles is we have Donald Trump on the other side. And I truly believe that if Biden does step down, I truly believe that the emotional relief that people who hate Donald Trump will feel about having a candidate they're more confident of, even if they are still angry that Biden's not there, I actually believe that, assuming it's Kamala Harris, which it should be, would come out of the convention ahead, and I think she'd stay there.
And not only that, I've been talking to donors and operatives who work with donors. Biden's money troubles are about to be very pronounced. I mean, there's some serious problems there. Conversely, they say if, you know, they made a switch and it was Harris, and I'm with you, Claire.
It's going to rain.
The amount of cash that will come in those first 3 days would be astronomical. And not that cash is everything, but it matters a lot. It really does. And look, the party's in a really tough spot. I don't think I've ever, none of us have experienced anything like this. And you wake up, I don't know if this is for you, but I wake up, I'm like, oh, Biden's going to stick it out. And every night I go to bed, I'm like, there's no way he's going to stick it out.
I know. Well, or whatever it is. Every day, I mean, it's been humbling for certain, you know, to like not make predictions, to not, you know, to understand like we're living in unprecedented times and like you can't know, and it's up to one person. And It's a very tough call.
That convention will be truly interesting. I'm somewhat excited for it.
That will matter.
Yeah.
That will matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was dreading going, and now I'm,
No, you got to go.
I'm excited.
I wasn't going to go. Now I'm going to go.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, you're the best, Sam. We are grateful for you to come and hang out with us for a while. Hopefully, we can get a
Anytime,
chance.
invite me back.
Yeah,
please.
no, we will for sure.
All
We will
right.
for sure.
Yeah,
You're the best.
You.
Thanks so much, Sam. Sam Stein is the managing editor at The Bulwark and an MSNBC contributor.
Thanks so much for listening. If you have a question for us, send it to howtowinquestions@nbcuni.com, or you can leave us a voicemail at 646-974-4194.
This show is produced by Vicky Vergolina. Jamaris Perez is our associate producer. Katie Lau is our audio engineer. Our head of audio production is Bryson Barnes. Aisha Turner is the executive producer for MSNBC Audio. And Rebecca Cutler is the Senior Vice President for Content Strategy at MSNBC.
Search for How to Win 2024 wherever you get your podcasts and follow the series.
Go beyond the headlines with the new MSNBC app. Get real-time analysis from live blogs to in-depth essays, video highlights from your favorite shows, and the latest updates on the 2024 election. Visit msnbc.com/app to download.